had just decided to toss out my attempt at emigrating to Ireland, and I was contemplating my next adventure. Italy was so close. It was also the last of the 7 wonders of the world I hadn't seen. Originally, I had been planning to save it for marriage, as it's one of the most spectacularly gorgeous and most romantic countries in Europe. But the temptation overtook me and I booked a spontaneous flight anyway. Usually when I travel, I micromanage my trips, maximizing every hour of every day at the expense of my sanity. For Italy, I decided to finally take my friend's advice and to roll with the adventure one day at a time. Or at least that's how it started. Traveling solo, I'm phenomenally cheap. There's no one to impress, and hey, the money's better spent on real experiences, not your bed. I didn't take my usual advice to book a safe, easy hotel for the first night though. I chose an incredibly cheap vacation condo in the heart of downtown Palermo. It was a nightmare to find. I wandered the streets and alleyways to find the right door. Driving and finding parking nearby was a whole different story. Speed limits in Italy definitely seem to be interpreted as optional the farther south you are. And as a foreigner, that can be terrifying. Palermo's on the island of Sicily, just off the southern tip of the country. As I quickly learned though, it's one of the poorer areas. While I felt quite safe, the streets looked like something you might find in Thailand, with loose power lines dangling in the alleyways, unmaintained apartments, and underdeveloped parks and beachfronts. Regardless, the entire island of Sicily has an alluring, less touristy appeal that feels at its very core just natural. While Palermo boasts the same impressive architecture that you'll find elsewhere in the country, with elaborate churches and fountains in city squares, it's also home to an Aladdin-style market and most notably, the Capuchin catacombs. The catacombs contain the remains of monks and other people of stature from the 1600s. They are sometimes preserved with glass cases, dehydrated on the ceramic pipes and washed with vinegar, or even embalmed. Kind of Egyptian style, I suppose. Some even requested their clothing be changed at regular intervals after they died. Though the bodies just sit there now, hanging on the wall or laying on the shelves in the open air. It was definitely one of the more unique and bizarre experiences that I've ever had. About an hour and a half south of Palermo are the 7th century ruins at Selinunte Archaeological Park. It features a temple and marketplace, and really would make a majestic viewpoint to spend a sunrise or sunset. But I was there during the heat of day, and I was absolutely dying. But I still spent a couple hours hopping around the ruins. The cool thing being is they don't cordon everything off. They let the visitors climb on whatever they want, so I got a chance to take some really cool photos. While the entire coastline drive is really nice, the real gem of the south coast is the Stair of the Turks. It's a really popular spot for sunbathers, and it's gleaming white. It's mudstone heading right into the ocean, terrace after terrace. And while I wish I could say that I did spend the rest of the afternoon there, I didn't. The Indiana Jones spirit that was pumping through my veins demanded more, and I headed off to the next set of ruins at the Valley of the Temples. Walking through the Valley of the Temples was amazing. It was huge, way bigger than I had originally anticipated, and I was only about an hour and a half from closing time. I took off my shoes to step into the energy of the place, and walked around right until the sunset. You can see really quickly why this place is one of the top rated on the entire island. If you only have a chance to see one set of ruins, absolutely go to Valley of the Temples. Driving from Syracuse to Catania on the east coast of Sicily, it's hard not to stop for the constant photos of the coastline, and some of the more unique attractions like the Ear of Dionysius, the Aretusa Spring, and all the little beachside cafes. Now this is where you should probably start building your immunity to cappuccinos if you want to survive, because there is nothing but caffeine the farther north you go. Okay, it was finally time for some adventure. Real adventure. I tempted fate and joined my crew for a trek to the crater rim at the Mount Etna volcano. It's still very active, and doing this traverse can be potentially dangerous. Just don't take off your helmet. Guided tours are required, and our guide yelled at a bunch of stray tourists trying to do their own thing to get off the hill. The climb itself was pretty easy, and anyone should be able to do it. Though when we finally did reach the top, it was a whole different experience. With smoking yellow vents, with volcanic gases oozing all over the place. It was surreal. The vapor clouds casting shadow and mystery all around us. It felt like an ideal spot for a supervillain to have his final battle or something. We did have a chance to meander through some of the crevices before we were told we had to pick up pace and get down the volcano as it was starting to become more active. We let our imaginations run wild, as if escaping from the final blast over at Pompeii thousands of years ago. After a ferry ride and a very long drive, I arrived on the mainland, in Sassi de Matera, likely one of the first human settlements in Italy over 9,000 years ago. You'll immediately feel like you've stepped into a scene of Lord of the Rings. The houses are dug right into the cliff sides. Many of the homes are in such poor condition, though, that they're uninhabitable. However, there's a huge regeneration effort with the aid of the EU underway. Take some time, hit up a cafe, and relax. Probably what is the most romantic restaurant in the entire country, the Ristorante Grotta Polizi's was nothing more than a photo hiding away in my bucket list folder on my laptop for years and years. I didn't know where it was, or even if it was a real place, until I had done some more Google searching, and when I realized it was in Italy, it was immediately on my bucket list. I had dreams of visiting here with a future wife, and who knows, maybe still will one day. But today, after making a quick pit stop at the local mall for something that would pass as dress clothes, I enjoyed an afternoon appy and prosecco. While finally, and truly relaxing, watching the ocean waves crash against the cliff face 25 meters below. This cave restaurant has been host to parties since about the 1700s, and to this day would still make the perfect wedding venue. It was well worth the massive detour to the far east coast of Italy, as the next stop would be the Amalfi Coast. The scenery turns from vast open vineyards with rolling hills to tight, narrow, winding mountain passageways, which will make you feel like you're about to scrape the paint off your rental car. Make sure you bought insurance. Even more painful are the viewpoints you'll have to skip, because there's nowhere to pull over, so make sure any passengers you have are cued to jump into action at a moment's notice. Aside from its rich cultural heritage, the towns on the Amalfi Coast are known for their limoncello liqueur production. You'll literally find it everywhere. My timing to arrive here on this particular day wasn't entirely by accident. I admit, my OCD-like planning instincts started to nag at me, and it worked in my favor, though. Today was a celebration of the Byzantine Empire's New Year, September 1st. While not quite as gaudy or as wild as Mardi Gras in New Orleans, the day was still chock full of parades. On the church steps that evening was a phenomenal spectacle of dance, music, fire, and pyrotechnic effects after the sun had set. This was a complete surprise to me, and I was in the right place at the right time. It was a sign that I had to make sure I didn't accidentally miss something important along the way. After all, I may never be back. In the next few days that followed, I booked and planned out the rest of my trip, hour by hour, as usual. Perhaps the relaxation vacation would have to wait until the next trip. And thankfully I had planned out the rest of the trip, as even at warp speed, I would only just narrowly make my flight home and gotten everything off my bucket list. Going at a day-by-day pace, I would have easily doubled my trip length, not to mention the cost. But tonight's light show was also a cue to sit back and take it all in, to just breathe. Pompeii, just south of Naples on the Mediterranean, is well known for its immaculately preserved ruins from the eruption in 79 AD. The volcanic gases immediately killed the town's occupants, and the 6 meters of ash helped keep it in pristine condition until modern day. The volcano had been sputtering for days before the eruption, but few of the townspeople took that threat seriously, ultimately to their own demise. The park will take a full day to explore. It's even easy to get lost in the immense network of buildings and streets. Admire the rich frescoes, the antiquity shop, the forum, temple of isis, baths, theaters, amphitheaters, and more. While most of the buildings are empty, a few artifacts have been placed for demonstration. With ample documentation on placards, it was pretty easy for my imagination to run wild with envisioning what life must have been like there. But the source of destruction, it called to me, and I headed to the trailhead of Mount Vesuvius. I'm not going to sugarcoat this one. While seeing the source of Pompeii's destruction was nice to get off the list, it was a super easy walk and a definite skip for anyone who's already done the more impressive active crater at Mount Etna. It was, however, fun to imagine if you were a volcano god, that this would be your viewpoint over the valley where you'd be hurtling your reign of destruction. Cappella San Severo is chalked with almost 30 impressive marble structures from the Rococo period. They drape all around you on every wall. It's really cool being in there. And it might sound weird, but despite it previously being a chapel, it reminded me of that final scene from the movie The Devil's Advocate. They're also super strict with the no photos policy, so dip in and take a photo with your mind. The Naples Archaeological Museum is a massive collection of relics, statues, frescoes, and even some of the most legendarily gorgeous mosaics. They even have an Egyptian section. In grade school, I remember learning about Hercules carrying the world on his shoulders, and it made my day to see a statue of him doing just that. It also made me laugh how explicit some of the artwork was, from a sculpture of an afternoon orgy with prostitutes to incredibly phallic paintings. To truly appreciate this venue, though, I would recommend a proper guided tour. It's no fun reading placards all day. Armed with my new best friend, Prosecco, I struck out to the coastal island of Capri to let my mind breathe a little after all the education of the last few days. On the boat, I made some new friends who were celebrating a wedding anniversary, then kicked back for a short ride to numerous swimming holes such as Blue Grotto, and eventually to our island destination. Most tours are pretty limited on time once arriving. You'll have to make a choice of what strikes your fancy the most. For me, it was hands down the gondola ride to the peak of Monte Solero. Atop, there's a cute little bar where you can sit back and enjoy the breathtaking views. I felt like a god of my own little Mount Olympus. I made some friends with two sisters who turned out to be news anchors for some sports channel, and taught them the ways of fact or fiction. A little bit of home abroad. The most serendipitous moment of the trip, or perhaps my entire life, was when I was wandering around Sorrento late one night and stumbled across the patio restaurant at the Excelsior Hotel. While I wasn't staying there, I felt sneaky as I crept onto the balcony and ordered up a late evening beverage. The cost to stay there that particular night? Over 500 euros. No thanks. As I watched the thunderstorm over the Mediterranean cast bolts of lightning across the sky, a warm breeze grazed my cheeks, the fire-lit torches accenting the already serene sunset. To my right, a grand piano with Elton John's Your Song being pumped out live. At the time, I never heard the song before, and now it's one of my favorites. It brought the whole scene together. I've never felt more at peace as when I sat there, undistracted, for hours. I was shocked when I showed up to Showbiz Napoli for my pizza making class, and I was the only one there. I got the royal VIP treatment, and also a gut fit to burst after pounding back marinara and margarita pizzas. Though my imagination wanted me to believe they gave me a private class because they thought that I might be some world-class travel influencer or something. Anyway, apparently the margarita pizza was designed after the red, white, and green Italian flag. Tomatoes for the red, mozzarella for the white, and basil for the green. The marinara pizza was, you guessed it, for fishermen. It was popularized in 1735 because of its low cost for poorer sailors, and that it could be easily made with preservable ingredients. Before arriving in Italy, I polled my friends for their best recommendations. My friend Anna's family is from Sicily, so that was a huge resource. My friend Jen, despite a few other suggestions, ensured me the Gardens of Ninfa was a romantic spectacle that I'd be a fool to miss. About an hour and a half or so south of Rome, they are gardens manicured around ancient ruins. It's a magical, Jane Austen-esque venue that belongs in the best of romance novels. However, no trip is complete without a few glitches along the way. When I arrived, it was closed for the season. I was so excited to get there that I neglected to check out not just the hours of operation, but the dates as well. Thoughts raced through my mind about sneaking around through the gates or hedges, whatever it would take to ensure that I didn't miss out. But I didn't want to get a criminal record in a foreign country if I got caught. FOMO was getting the best of me. And then, a caretaker appeared from the side of one of the buildings and told me the only way in was through a private tour. I offered him 100 euros, but he declined and told me I had to schedule with an agency. He made some calls for me, but couldn't find an English guide. He then saw the look of desperation in my eyes, and took pity. "How many euros did you say you had on you again?" And it was just as quickly he let me in to wander around solo for a whole hour. This is a place that is normally packed with tourists. The Vatican and most of the other attractions as you head farther north in Italy, especially the notable ones, are such hotspots that you'll have to buy timed entry tickets well in advance. The incredible paintings by Michelangelo in the Sistine Chapel were just as amazing as I had imagined. While no photos are permitted here, there are numerous other photo-friendly rooms with art cascading from every ceiling and wall. You won't be disappointed. One of my favorites was the Gallery of Maps, commissioned in 1580 by Pope Gregory XIII. It was complete in 3 years. It contains numerous topographical maps of Italy. Until being there, in this moment, this time, I had no idea that Narnia was actually a real place. Outside, there is a giant bronze globe called the Sphere Within a Sphere. It looks like it's cracking apart and has gears on the inside. The artist states the inner ball represents a fragile and complex earth, while the outer and harder shell is Christianity. Rome is so saturated with culture, history, and amazing architecture that it would be easy to spend most of your vacation there. Spend a day and just wander around on foot, making sure not to miss the Pantheon, the Spanish Steps, and the Trevi Fountain. Your friends will ask about those. There are numerous legends around throwing various numbers of coins into the fountain, from guaranteeing a return visit to finding true love. Over 1.5 million euros are collected every year and given to Catholic charities to help the poor and homeless. The Roman Forum was the heart of ancient Rome. From gladiator matches, elections, and public speeches to trials, temples, and even the prison where St. Peter was held prior to his execution. This is one place not to be cheap. Take a guided tour and take your time. There is so much history here, you don't want to miss any of the details. Just behind the Forum was the whole reason I came to Italy, the Colosseum. One of the biggest goals of my life was to complete all 7 wonders of the world, and now, here I was, standing on top of my goal. The feeling of victory rushed through my head and I couldn't stop smiling. Plus, I beat my ex to completing all 7. Many people assume the Colosseum looks the way it does because it has decayed over the centuries. In reality, various leaders actually harvested building material from the site. It was cheaper and more effective than digging up fresh stone. If you have time, by all means check it out in the day, but also try to go at night. The way they light it up makes it look absolutely magical. And you'll learn a few of the insider details about what used to happen there. In my eyes, Pisa only really had one major attraction. The tower, of course. It's impressive that it's still standing to this day, but that's not just by chance. Engineers dug a series of tunnels on the north side of the tower to remove small amounts of soil and then used metal cables to pull it back into place. At this current time, they believe it should be secure for another 200 years or so. The winding, narrow staircases will definitely give you a feeling of claustrophobia, not to mention the irrational fears that you could get trapped if it were to spontaneously collapse. The view at the top, which features the city and the Pisa Cathedral, was well worth any sort of mental anguish. Florence was an absolute nightmare to drive through. With all of the ZTL zones, which are areas that prohibit traffic at certain times of day, you'll be lucky if you don't wind up with multiple fines, unless you have a very keen eye for signage or have a permit. Don't be fooled by other cars going ahead of you. Many tourists believe it's a cash grab, but it's always important to well verse yourself in local laws before traveling anywhere. Find somewhere safe to park and walk into the city's core instead. Now, I'm not much of a shopper, so all the Gucci, Prada, and Tiffany stores went to waste on me. I was more interested in seeing the real-life original of The Birth of Venus and other works at the Uffizi Gallery. And, of course, the statue of David. Now that was incredibly impressive. Ponte Vecchio is a medieval strip of stores along a bridge that connects 2 segments of the city. More shopping opportunities. Ugh. Gelato, of which the city is bursting with, piqued my interest a little bit more. Holy crap, was that delicious. At this point, I was getting pretty fatigued with all the churches and cathedrals, but still made time to do another tour on the Florence Cathedral. It's an impressive double-layered dome structure which has helped keep the frescoes free of damage over the years. At the time, it was an engineering marvel. 2 quirky and unique attractions that I loved, now these are the sorts of things I live for, were the Leonardo da Vinci Museum, which had tons of bizarre creations of his that you could actually play with. This would be a great place to take kids. I was there for well over an hour, just tinkering. Then, there's also the Santa Maria Novella Pharmacy. It's credited with being the oldest pharmacy in the world, being built around 1612. Today, they sell everything from toiletries and liqueurs to medicinal balms and foods. Cinque Terre is very similar to the Amalfi Coast, with one big exception, and be it the novelty that you have to commute town to town via train. There's 5 towns in total, so that's a pretty big day. Tours are usually about a solid 12 hours round trip from Florence, and that includes 2 hours driving each way. Some of the most legendary photos of Italy come from here. You'll again be saturated with cafes, fishing harbors, gorgeous coastal scenery, and a full spectrum of colorful buildings. Now that really makes the place. And there's a ton of idyllic places to sit down and read. Be prepared for a lot of well-earned downtime. Ham and Parmesan are two of the country's staples. I took a big detour and headed to Parma to get the how it's made experience. The Parmesan part was fun to watch, not to mention sample all the delicious variations. It felt like being back home in wine country, Canada. However, by the time we hit the ham portion of the tour, I wanted to plug my nose and fast forward. The smell of rotting or curing meat was so overwhelming I almost threw up. The large metal elevators taking us between levels felt like something out of a horror movie, not to mention the long dark hallways of pork strung up to age. By the end of the tour, it was time to sample. Do you actually think I did? Yeah, not so much. Verona is famous for Shakespeare's Romeo and Juliet. Tradition has it that if you cup the right breast of the bronze Juliet statue, it will bring you luck. The verdict's still out on that one, and this attraction is no end to controversy for people who overly sexualize her in the ritual, and cite her age of 13 in the original play. But both men and women, too numerous to count, are still seen trying their best hand at a better future. You can also visit Lover's Lane and Juliet's Balcony. To this day, the Verona Arena is still a venue for performing arts, notably opera. While I was there was a huge concert with multiple local artists. Taking a ferry to Venice, my first stops were the outlying islands of Murano, Torcello, and Burano. These colorful islands are famous for their handicrafts, such as glassblowing. I had a chance to check out a live demonstration of a glassblower at work, but I'm pretty sure that's part of the regular tour. Then I got to wander the city streets for the remainder of the afternoon. Venice is a veritable maze of homes, shops, and passageways. Without Google Maps, I would have been incredibly lost. Make sure to download offline maps no matter where you go. Taking off the Bridge of Sighs, which was the last view of the outside world that convicts would see before being imprisoned, I took a quick tour of the prison as well, and then decided to stop somewhere a little more lighthearted. For contrast, another church couldn't hurt, right? St. Mark's Basilica had a treasure room filled with artifacts that would make Indiana Jones scream. Having that penchant for unique attractions, the Libreria Acqua Alta or Highwater Bookshop appeased my nearly insatiable lust for such places. Room after room of stacked books, wall-to-wall magazines and maps, it feels like you've stepped into a scene from Harry Potter. Waterproof bins, bathtubs, and even gondolas store many of the items on ground level, as thus to haphazardly protect them from the numerous annual floods of the city. Venice isn't Venice without the obligatory ride down the Grand Canal in a gondola while being serenaded by song and accordion. It was packed. Absolutely everyone loves this little cliche a little too much. But who was at a talk? I was there too. There was one performer for every 4 gondolas, and we were on a boat with other random tourists they matched us up with. The ride was short and only mildly satisfying. If you're looking for a romantic moment like the movies, you won't find it there. I made some new friends from South Africa and had a double date night on the edge of the canal over sunset. Now that was romantic. At 3,000 meters above sea level, almost the same as Cusco, Peru, the hike through the Italian Alps at Tricime di Lavoretto is breathtaking. Long stretches of Canadian-esque mountains and rest stops along the way with tea houses and more. Now these guys know how to make hiking a luxury sport. I could get used to that. The villages surrounding the mountain ranges are quaint and something that made me think medieval Germany meets a ski resort. But perhaps that's my lack of cultural awareness showing. Either way, this was a place that's been etched permanently in my revisit list should I ever return. The hikes are endless, and you could spend months here. If I hadn't planned so well, I would have missed Lake Como entirely. I was really thanking myself for that at this point. The entire lake is dotted with these tiny little communities, rich with their own personalities. They are connected by a tiny but fast ferry system. Each destination felt like stepping onto a different resort, and I couldn't believe more people didn't live here. It was calm, quiet, and far less touristy than I expected. I strolled around the quaint city streets, admired the gardens, and climbed the haunted stairs to the Vezio Castle in Verona. The bird's eye view it gives you of Lake Como will make you want to stick around for a while. And if you're particularly lucky, perhaps the Lombard Queen of Teoduolinda will come pay you a visit. To me, Milan was just another big city, the city that I was going to leave from. I wasn't too sure what to see, even with all of the TripAdvisor recommendations and blogs that I read. So I booked myself into a guided tour. Now, that's something I usually avoid at all costs because they're often way too slow for the RPM of my life, as well as overpriced. But it was the only way to make sure I didn't miss access to the Last Supper painting by Leonardo da Vinci. So I humored the tour and hit the other attractions on their list. We got carted around the cathedral. Apparently it took 6 centuries to complete. It is quite elaborate, I guess. It's covered with statues and has your typical impressive stained glass windows. After which, we hit up the market at Galleria Vittorio. Tradition has it that if you grind your heel into the mosaic of the bull in the center of the complex, it will bring you great financial success. I'm still waiting. It was all pretty run-of-the-mill, and a calmer end to a whirlwind of a trip. That's until, at least, I met Dahlia. I like ending every trip with a little bit of luxury and splurge than having a dinner atop Cesarea 7, a bar in Milan. I was settling in for a night with more Prosecco and amping up for a relaxing sunset view of the city. We started chatting because, like myself, she was chronically low on battery power and needed to juice up with my power bank. We both come from very different worlds. She is a high-energy fashion designer living in Vancouver, back in Canada. She took me into her world for the night and scored us VIP access to some Vogue party next to the Milan Cathedral. It was like hanging out with a celebrity for a few hours. We did a couple photo ops nearby and called it a night. Without question, Italy was the most photogenic country I have ever visited, with the greatest diversity and cultural attractions and such intense, rich history. But now, it was time to head on to my next adventure.